What is going on, guys? Yugioh here, and today we have a pure Kaiju deck list. Kaijus are very popular in the current metagame. Gamma Seal is used commonly. They're one of the best forms of removal because there aren't many cards in the game that are immune to being tributed. Very fun gimmick kind of archetype. It revolves around giving your opponent a Kaiju over one of their monsters, special summoning your own Kaiju and having them do battle, kind of like in the Godzilla movies where two giant monsters show up out of nowhere and start fighting. That's pretty much the idea with this deck. Pretty fun, and the field spell gives them a lot of opportunities to do things outside of the tributing your monsters or tributing your opponent's monsters gimmick. So we'll go ahead and get started. First off, we have 3 copies of Jizukiru, the Star Destroying Kaiju. If it has Kaiju counters on the field, it does have a negate that is not once per turn. All you need is 3 Kaiju counters. Next up, we have 3 copies of Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju. You can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, and your opponent cannot activate cards or effects for the rest of his turn. This one is pretty oppressive. Next up, we have 3 copies of Dogoran, the Mad Flame Kaiju. You can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field and destroy all monsters your opponent controls. 2 copies of Godarla, the Mystery Dust Kaiju. Once per turn, quick effect, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, and the attack and defense of all other monsters on the field become halved. Not very useful, but it is a low, I guess relatively lower attack Kaiju monster, so pretty easy to beat over with your bigger ones. Next up, we have 2 copies of Gamma Seal, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. You're not going to be summoning Gamma Seal to your field often, but he does have the effect of you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, negate the activation of a card or effect. It's just a Kaiju with the lowest attack, so if you give it to your monster, if you give it to your opponent, you'll be able to beat over it pretty easily. Next up, we have Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Dogoran. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast, right? Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand while your opponent controls a Kaiju. You can only control 1 Kaiju monster. Once per turn, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, equip 1 Kaiju monster from your hand or graveyard to this card. Because we're using Remove Brainwashing, you're going to have some Kaiju monsters in your graveyard, so you will have a lot of targets for Mecha Dogoran. We don't play 3 of them, because you might not be in that situation often, but it's pretty cool to have, pretty good to have, just in case you have a lot of Kaijus in your graveyard that you aren't really using that often. Next up, we have 3 copies of Radion, the Multi-Dimensional Kaiju. You can, once per turn, you can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, special summon a Radion token with 2800 attack, but it cannot be used as a synchro material. Pretty good for swarming, because you're pretty much only going to be having 1 monster on the field at any given time. Next up, we have 1 copy of Kumongus, the Sticky String Kaiju. You can remove 2 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field until the end of the next turn. The monster that your opponent normal or special summoned cannot attack, and its effects are negated. Now, we're only playing 1 copy of Silent Wabi in the final version of the deck. You will see in one of the replays that I am using 2 of them. But I dropped this down to 1 and added in the 1 copy of Metaverse. So in the final version of the deck, we do only run 1 copy of Silent Wabi. During your main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's side of the field. When summoned this way, draw 1 card, and if you do, your opponent gains 2,000 life points. Now, this may be misleading at first. Your opponent will draw the card, and you will get the 2,000 life points. I know that's kind of worded oddly, but your opponent draws the card, you get the life points. But I put it in this deck because it only has 1,000 attack, so you'll be able to do a lot of damage with your Kaijus. Now that's it for the monsters. We'll move on to the spells. A couple one-ofs, we have Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster, Terraforming, and Monster Reborn. Those are just the one-ofs. Terraforming to search out your field spell, Harpy's Feather Duster to get rid of any problem spell or trap cards, Monster Reborn just in case you don't have any Kaijus in the hand, but you do have them in the graveyard, and Raigeki obviously to just clear your opponent's board after you summon your Kaiju, of course. Next, we have 3 copies of Advanced Draw. A lot of people will use, what's it called? Trade-in. But I like this one a little bit better because the special summoning of the Kaiju is not once per turn. The only limitation is you can only control one, so if you special summon your Kaiju, Advanced Draw, you'll be able to special summon another Kaiju from your hand. And you get to draw 2 cards off of it, so pretty good. Next up, we have 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. This is your main spell card. Destroy as many monsters on the field as possible, then special summon in attack position 2 Kaiju monsters with different names from your deck, 1 on each side. But they cannot change their battle positions and must attack if able. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card and add 1 Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. This is an insanely good card if your opponent has a full board of monsters and no negation. You can just wipe their entire monsters and then give them a Kaiju. You'll probably give them one of your weaker ones, like Godarla or Kumongus or Gameciel. And you can summon out your big ones that have the Effect Lock or the Negate. Very good. Next up, we have 3 copies of Yugioh Waterfront. This is your field spell. Each time a card or cards is sent from the field to the graveyard, place 1 Kaiju counter on this card for each sent card, with a maximum of 5. Once per turn, while 3 or more Kaiju counters are on this card, you can add 1 Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. If this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can remove 1 Kaiju counter from this card instead. You'll mainly be using this for your monsters effects. I haven't really used the other effects of Yugioh Waterfront. I haven't really been in an opportunity where I absolutely needed to. Mostly this is just to hold your counters so your Kaijus can use their effects. And speaking of which, we have 3 copies of the Kaiju Files. A continuous spell card. Each time a Kaiju monster or monsters is special summoned from the hand or graveyard, place 1 Kaiju counter on this card with a maximum of 5. Once per turn, you can target 1 Kaiju monster on the field, destroy that monster. Then special summon 1 Kaiju monster with a different original name from your deck to its controller's field. You can send this card with 3 or more Kaiju counters to the graveyard and add 1 Kaiju spell or trap from your hand, except the Kaiju Files. This can be if you only have your high attack Kaiju monsters in your hand and you give them one of your big ones. You can use the Kaiju Files to blow it up and then give them a weaker one. But other than that, this is just to hold counters so that you can keep negating, you can keep shutting down monster effects, you can keep blowing up their field, keep summoning the tokens. This is just to hold counters. Now onto the trap cards. We only run 4 of them. 3 copies of Remove Brainwashing. You can use Owner's Seal if you want to, but that's just a spell card. It doesn't stay on the field. But Remove Brainwashing does stay on the field. The controller of all monsters on the field returns to its owners. If you control a Kaiju and you give your opponent a Kaiju, since you're only able to control 1, it'll just go to the graveyard and they won't have a monster anymore. So if they set up this huge boss monster, you give them a Kaiju, activate Remove Brainwashing, they don't even have a monster anymore, so they're free for an open attack. Next up, we just have 1 copy of Metaverse, and that's just to get your field spell a little bit more easily, because this deck can really only work if you have the field spell out, not all the time, but the field spell really does give this deck more consistency and more power, so just having another way to search out your field spell is very nice for the deck. We're not playing an extra deck. You can if you want. If you want to fill it up with just random monsters and trade Advanced Draw for Pot of Desires or Pot of Extravagance, you can do that, but I didn't really see the need to use an extra deck. So that's pretty much it. And so, yeah, this is the deck list for Pure Kaijus. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and then we will get into some duels.